Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you very much, colleagues. It's wonderful to be here. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which we meet. I note that we have over 70 people online, so wherever you are, the lands which you are joining us on, we acknowledge the traditional owners, their elders, past, present, and emerging. And I note that it's just past Anzac Day, and my daughter, who is 11, is in grade 6. She had to do an assignment. We didn't use ChatGPT for this one. It was a question around what is the importance of Anzac Day. One of the questions that their teacher asked is, what conflicts had Australia been involved in? And so we went to just pre-AI, called Wikipedia, and had a look there. And many of the conflicts that I could recall, yes, they were all there. The ones that I could not recall were ones before we became a single nation. If you think through the wars that Australia had been involved in prior to becoming Australia per se, they all happened on this soil. 2 of which were an uprising against the leadership from people that had joined from other countries. So there's the Eureka Stockade and the Rum Rebellion. Every other one was a war of attrition that took place on our soil between Indigenous peoples and people from largely Europe. And the thing that was interesting to me as I was reading this was, if I reflected on the history that I learnt when I was going through school, certainly I had heard of the importance of culture, but I hadn't heard of these wars. And so I think it's a sad reminder, but it's an appropriate acknowledgement of the country in which we are living right now, to acknowledge that these have been important times. Now, this was the title of this presentation. I'm so excited to be presenting this. The title of this presentation is not my own. It was an offhand comment from a colleague of mine, DVCA, University of Western Australia, who said that's the thing that's keeping them up at night, about a year ago. And I thought, yeah, that's a pretty good worry for us all to be able to go through. So go through that. I'm looking forward to it. And it was really just starting to ask, what is it that we want over the next 20 years from our community? So I often reflect on my own children. As I mentioned, one is 11, the other one's 9. What do I want them to be leading in our community? And from that, how do we change our assessment and our delivery of education at university and before you get to university as well? They are the key elements. Let me just see, John, if I get this right. What have I done? Oh, okay, good. I got it now. So just as a quick overview, I'm going to start really simply. I think there will be people that are really, really engaged in what AI actually is and what generative AI actually is. But I'm going to make an assumption that not everybody is. So I'll be talking a little bit from my understanding of what generative AI is right now. We'll then talk a little bit about what the impact is on our community before we then move on to that crystal ball gazing element of what might the future look like. And I'm a little bit worried to do that in some ways, but we've got to try. And so we'll have a little bit of a look there. There was a question, Jason Lodge is in the room, that was asked at Academic Board. I think Greg Hange I saw in the room as well. Greg Hange is in the room. Hello, over there. And you asked, what's the future direction of AI? And I can't answer that. And I don't think, Jason, I think you gave a great answer, but there's not a really clear answer. But there is a question, which is, how do we expect people, how do we expect communities to respond to AI? And I think if we can look at it from that lens, we might be able to have a direction then of what our assessment and our delivery of education should look like. Then we start looking at what our graduates can do that a chatbot can't. And then I finish up with just a few thoughts for myself on generative AI and education. So let's define it. If I took a natural language interpreter and I linked it to a statistical optimization tool and the mathematics is gnarly and I don't understand the mathematics at all, that's essentially what you got. It's those two linking together. And so you have an engine when you put in your reference of this is what I want you to either paint or draw or make a video of or give me some text feedback on, where it says, not only am I going to interpret what you say, but I'm now going to make a prediction of what the next word should be that I'm going to give you back. And so what it does is it just works out what the next word is, word for word, or what the next pixel should be, drawing by drawing, until you get arriving at statistically an appropriate answer. Now, I've put a few that are there. I've got the GPT-5, which is interesting. So we started with ChatGPT. That's a year ago now. It doesn't feel like a year ago, but it was a year ago. ChatGPT-4 is there. GPT-5, I started listening to the folk who are writing these, and they're starting to make claims which, to my eye, I'm not sure whether they're technically correct or whether they're sales pitch. And I'm just not sure. It's one or the other. But they are certainly very happy. OpenAI is very happy to say that when you see GPT-5, it's going to be the next step that GPT-4 was, like well beyond what your imagination is. It sounds like a sales pitch to me, but maybe I'm being hopeful in my understanding of that. I started having a look at DALL-E a year ago. So this image here was from DALL-E. And then later on in the presentation this morning, I made some updates. DALL-E 3 was my friend. And so again, I can see some differences in what you can now do with it. But again, it seems to be a bit more helping you to interact with the AI bot rather than the AI bot doing anything substantially different, would be my observation. The disturbing part is the video generators, to me. You can absolutely have photorealistic videos of people walking down the street. It looks exactly as if, to my eyes, exactly as if someone was actually recording that. There's music generators, and the one that really concerns many of us, of course, is deepfake generators. And I was listening to a podcast just the other day where, for entertainment, they decided to swap who was saying what in the 2016 United States of America election, so that Donald Trump was talking about baskets of deplorables and Hillary Clinton was talking about drain the swamp. And it was absolutely spot on. I couldn't actually pick it with my ear. So I'm sure if you did a very careful analysis, you would be able to determine that that was actually a deep fake, but to my ear, I couldn't pick the difference. So it's a bit of a worry. Okay. So what does generative AI need? And now I'm going to talk a little bit about generative AI, understanding that there is different types of AI out there. Okay, so and there has been for decades. It's not something new in that sense. But generative AI needs a few things. The first thing is we need a very large data set. Well, I say a very large data set. ChatGPT, I'm trying to think, what was it? I think it was, at most, it was 500 gigabytes. It might have been 200 gigabytes of information that was trawled from the web to be able to teach the generative AI. So that was the large data set. Now, you might start by thinking that that's quite large. I invite you to go to Officeworks, JB Hi-Fi, any of those places, buy yourself an external hard disk drive and then ask yourself again, is it a lot of information? And it's not. It's a tiny amount of information, really. Then there's trainers, and there is some significant ethical questions here. There's ethical questions over here as well when it comes to, and we'll touch on those, when it comes to accuracy, when it comes to copyright issues. But there are some serious issues over here because somehow you need to be able to teach the engine what you don't want. And the only way you can do that is to have people staring at a screen and sitting there and saying, no, you can't have that. Which means that what we have with these tools is we have got lots of people, I think it was Nigeria, if memory serves, who sat in front of computers day in, day out, just picking up what we don't want to see in order to be able to create these tools and harness them in the direction that we think is ethically okay. So immediately there's an ethical quandary there with that approach. Powerful computing. So there's been really a lot of this is around graphics processing. These computing capabilities have recently significantly increased, and they've just gone past the threshold where it is sufficiently fast and sufficiently powerful that the data set, the engines that look through this fast enough that they can occur, not necessarily in real time, but pretty close to real time. And so at that point, it is usable for the general population. The environmental impact, it's now, was it every time you make a call to ChatGPT, someone's going to correct me on this, I think it was a 60-watt light globe, it might have been a 100-watt light globe for an hour, is the environmental impact in terms of cost. So and that there would be a power impact. No one will be doing the very clever calculations of the amount of cost that it takes to actually build these things to start with. So it just gives you a sense of the environmental impact that this occurs, that this creates. And then validation. Ultimately, if we don't have people playing with this, enjoying this, saying this is fun, and ultimately for companies like OpenAI that it's making them money, it won't work. No one will use it. And so essentially they're just the four things that generative AI needs in order to be an ongoing success, if you want to call it that, in our community. Yeah, where are we? Okay. The other question that occurred, and this was probably about 6 to 9 months ago, there was certainly in the media a sense that, hang on, the AI's got sentience, we're in trouble. No, the AI does not have sentience. It's just not a thing. So it only produces results that are statistically likely. It needs an input in order to be able to do that. If no one is playing with generative AI, if no one's touching it, it doesn't sit there and think about world domination. It just sits there quietly and does nothing. Maybe a little clock process that's spinning around. That's about it. So it needs a person to engage with it. And that's a really interesting part because that means that it is a reflection of ourselves rather than something that's produced there. It's a reflection of ourselves in two ways. One, the questions that we ask it, and two, the data that we've given it to train on. So it's a reflection on ourselves. And it doesn't have any inherent desire. It doesn't have a relationship. Its entire point, and it's been designed to be convincingly human. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not dangerous. People who engage with AI, with generative AI products, can form significant mental health problems. People have committed suicide on the advice of generative AI. So it does trick the brain to thinking that you are collaborating with something that's real. So that there is it is so good at being that reflection of what is convincingly human. Yeah. Anyway, so, and I've got some papers there that might be of interest to people. This is from another paper, and right at the end of this slide deck, there is a set of references that we've got. But I wanted to just give you a general sense of the challenges of generative AI. And I think they're all pretty much understood by us, certainly the ones in bold. If we look at the bias, we'll talk about that in a second, but the bias very much comes from the two ends, maybe three areas. The one where you say, what information did you put into it? Then you've got the trainers. Then you've got the questions that people keep posing. Those three things create a bias. And there's a pretty big worry there. I've touched on the ethics already. Our assumption in using this without any moral concern whatsoever does not consider the fact that people have had to train these tools. The tools at the minute, they're a statistical engine of what is the next appropriate word. There's no logic there of what that word actually means. And so misinformation abounds. And we'll see a couple of examples of that. And that can be willful, as we'll see, particularly when it comes to creating, well, there's the deep fakes, but images and video. Absolutely, there can be willful misinformation that someone's decided to create, or it could be that it's just made a mistake. You know? And what you get is just noise coming back out, gibberish. The one that I most like is a question to ask ChatGPT. If it takes 3 hours to dry 3 towels, how long does it take to dry 9 towels? Now, it will say 27 hours. It'll just multiply the 2 numbers together. It'll even tell you how it's come up with the calculation. Now, I put to you, you ask anyone, it depends how long your line is and if you're just going to sit there and put more and more towels up at the same time. So it's able to give that misinformation. I guess the one that we're most worried about is job displacement. And that job displacement occurs for 2 reasons. One, will the jobs exist at all? My bet is yes, they will. And I'll talk a little bit about that. The other one, though, is do we have the skills to be able to continue doing the work that we've been able to do? And that there is a bit more of a worry, and I can understand that. When I'm focusing on, the last time that we've seen something like this, Margaret Thatcher was talking about the budget in the UK in the 1980s, and was saying, oh, the budget's starting to turn. And people said, oh, hang on, that's great, but we've still got a lot of people unemployed. And her line after that was, yes, but those jobs are now being replaced by the new technologies. Now, I won't ask you what your opinion is of trickle-down economics or anything like that, but I would say that we are seeing that on the global scale, particularly when it comes to white-collar jobs at the minute. Now, I've touched on some of these other points in grey. I'm not going to go through all of them because I'm aware of the time. But when you do get the references, if you want to be able to show this to students, whichever, talk to people about it, please go ahead. There's a great reference that'll help you with that. But there are a number of concerns there. So let's talk about generative AI and the impact on our community, at least from my perspective. And I'll caution us in this part of the discussion to say, this is my opinion. There's any number of ways of looking at the impact of generative AI in our community. Let's have a look at that. I started in looking at this presentation, or an earlier version of this presentation, by thinking about, well, where's the data set from? And a lot of the data set comes from whoever produces the internet prior to ChatGPT. I'm looking at ChatGPT largely here. And it didn't surprise me very much to note that most English language news sites are either American or British. And one of the concerns that I have when I think of a university such as the University of Queensland, where we're planning to create global leaders, for me, a global leader is someone who asks the question of what's the local impact? And yet, if we're then handing a tool that generalizes based on a biased input from only the largest news sources, for example, we've instantly got a bias there. We've instantly got a concern. So the evidence-led training data, I think it comprises the majority of ChatGPT learning. There's certainly been papers that have looked at the implicit bias due to sources and training. And I've just highlighted the 5 which are not based in the United States of America or Britain as sources. Most of those would be India, and that's just by population. So that is just an interesting observation to start with, I think. Let's ask some other questions. This is now 2020. Now, colleagues, I put to you that 2020, we knew that COVID was big, but we didn't know how big at that point. It was a scary thing. And there was this question here of the share of people who trust journalists in their country. And it's kind of interesting, actually. This is the Wellcome Global Monitor. And you've got Australia. Australia's a little bit worrying, I must confess, when I look at that colour and I look over here to see that it's 60 to 70%. You'd kind of hope higher than that. And certainly when we were looking at the trust in the ABC, I think that was over 80%. in the last time I've heard. But you can see these concerns. You can certainly see the impact in the United States of America, and look at Russia. Look at Russia, folks. Just amazing. The Arab Spring, look at Egypt and look in the Middle East in general. There's some really interesting data there. And just imagine, this is before ChatGPT. This is before the deepfakes really took over. Equally, people who trust science. And I'll give another example of this in a second. And again, in Australia, it's quite high. In other areas, it is too, but we do have some concerns there, and I'll talk to that. There's been a recent paper. Look at 2019 data. The share of people that disagree that vaccines are safe. Now, I would say that the numbers are still probably reasonably low, but we do know that there have been concerns due to fake data that's generated about the safety of medicine in general. And what I've done is I've just put over here also the global number of child deaths per year from 1990 through to 2017, and the causes as well. And so there's a correlation, or an inverse correlation here. Actually, we're getting so used to the fact that we've got this nailed, we're okay, that then there is this distrust in science and distrust in vaccines, which I think is interesting. So this one's newer, and I think this is really cool. This is a preprint, so I warn you, it's a preprint. It's not something that has been reviewed as yet, but Nature have put it out there as a preprint by Colonia et al. Looking at over 70,000 people in 67 countries, and their question was, do you trust science? And this is the first time that there's been this post-COVID evaluation. It varies among countries. I was really interested to note that countries with the above average trust, hey, it includes Australia, which is exciting, also includes the United States of America. Below average trust, I was completely thrown by the fact that Germany was on that list. It must be wrong. I heard someone say it must be wrong. It cannot be right. I was completely thrown by that, but there it is. And then you get to Japan and you just go, hang on, what's going on here? But anyway, so now it's a Likert scale 1 to 5. So I'll allow people to sort of take some solace with their questions of whether these social science approaches are appropriate for this type of question. However, they did notice that where there is left-leaning politics, and you can read the paper in entirety, there is a higher trust. In right-leaning communities, there is a lower trust, and they were able to see that correlation fairly strongly. So I thought that that was an interesting piece. The other bit, this is a different study on the left-hand side, again from Wellcome, back in 2018. But the point that I got out of this, again, the trust in science, is where you have the low income, and if you add up the high trust and the medium trust, it's lower, just higher maybe, than what you have in the high income here. So the concern that I have is our technological separation getting wider when I see this? That's ultimately what that graph tells me. So there's that other question as well. Anyway, I thought that that one would be interesting to folks, given the current context. Oh, and then we have this. Now, it's created by AI. It's hilarious. I mean, I think even the Pope would say it doesn't really matter. Right? I'm sure the Pope has forgiven whoever created this. And yet, it was picked up by both traditional and social media as real in an instant. And so someone in their bedroom now has the power to change what we believe. And if someone in their bedroom has the power to change what we believe, how do they change what we believe when it comes to science, when it comes to journalism, when it comes to what politicians say, when it comes to what we say? So there is this most significant change that's occurring right now. Again, listening to a podcast over the weekend and looking at a lot of this area in preparation for today, the sense was World War I was the ushering in of the last century. This is probably the ushering in of this century, these type of questions. But it does add these questions of bias, ethics, misinformation, and trust. So I just thought, we know it can be misused, even if it's funny. So now we get to the question of what's the future of AI in our community? By the way, did you see the difference? The first slide was DALL-E. This is DALL-E 3, people. I mean, it looks photoreal, doesn't it? And it was a lot easier to use, dare I say. So this one here I created this morning. How long did it take me? Probably about 3 minutes to be able to get to that. And as I said, it's a fraught business of crystal ball gazing. So forgive me, and I'm quite open for people to disagree with what I now say. So I've been looking at, I've got a mechanical engineering degree, and I've taught aerospace engineering some time ago. And so I've looked at pilots for a very, very long time. And I've asked myself, and I've got pilot friends, some pilot friends who wanted me to become a pilot. I turned them down. And the question is, what do they do? And actually what they're doing is they're independently orchestrating a whole lot of systems that just happen to be flying in the air. And they're consistently saying, now, what are all the systems doing? Now, I put to you a couple of things here. One, we don't ask people to pilot a large aircraft just on the basis of what they've learnt in Microsoft Flight Simulator. None of us would feel comfortable with this. And this actually starts to go with, will we be comfortable with generative AI taking over jobs? Because if we sit there and we go, oh, no way would we do that. How would you feel about generative AI in the cockpit? No pilot. I then think of the Miracle on the Hudson. And I put to you that the one thing that you wanted on that plane, you wanted the systems. You wanted someone to actually know how the systems to go and how they work. And then you wanted a person to say calmly, we've got this, don't worry about it. You wanted a whole crew of people to be able to give advice under pretty stressful situations. And you wanted the person who designated themselves as the leader to say, I'll be the last off the craft. And that's what we got. That's why we call it the Miracle on the Hudson. So there's a couple of things that, to my mind, come out of this. One is we still need people to understand the basics. The people in this diagram here, they started their work probably in a little Cessna with not very much in the way of the technology that they're relying on here. But they needed to know the fundamentals in order for us as a community to say, now it's safe for you to be able to go that next step. And if we turn our minds to all of the white collar areas that we rely upon around us, I think the same conversation is going to take place over the next 20 years, where we say, yeah, ChatGPT can allow you to monitor a whole lot of things at once, but actually what we need is people. Another thing that I get out of this is when things are going bad, or indeed that there might be good news, when there is important news, we want a person to be there. Now, I was very, very tempted to put a Tesla car up here and for people to say, but hang on, it almost drives itself. And the point is almost. The legal framework that we have around us does not quite allow the Tesla to drive itself. We just can't quite do it. And I think it's a human instinct to say that we want someone there who's going to take responsibility. So that's an interesting observation, at least for me, maybe not for you. So the other part is that orchestration. Let's have a look at that. I have got a little frustrated with the number of industrial revolutions that we have. We're apparently in the fourth one. I'm sure others will be able to name all of the other ones, starting from the first industrial revolution. I can't. All right. Here's my thing. I think actually what's happening is we've reached a point of continuous curve of creative evolution. We're adding more and more capabilities as we're going along, rather than saying, bang, there's something new. And so that goes back to that orchestration of technology around us. This comes with risks, good and bad. There's greater autonomy, which as individuals we really want. I can do what I want. Awesome, wonderful stuff. But there is that greater risk as well. There's a greater risk because you don't know the impact of what you're doing on the broader community, or as I said, on those local communities. And so then there is a greater reliance on what we do to educate for evidence and deep knowledge of that societal impact. Now, I've used this word very, very carefully here. And I know that this is a point of contention. I'm saying that AI and humans, they complement each other and they collaborate. Whoa. Why have I used the word collaboration? Largely so that people get upset with me. And the reason that I want people to get upset with me for using the word collaboration is because then we talk about it. Unlike your car, unlike actually your computer, Word, Excel, whatever that you use, PowerPoint in this particular case, I don't collaborate with PowerPoint. I don't collaborate with my car. I don't collaborate with the train that I get onto when I'm going to work. This here is designed to play with the very networks of my brain to make me think that I'm talking with someone. It is a simulated collaboration. And unless we call it out for what it is and have the debate on whether it's really collaboration or not, then I think we are in trouble, which is why I call it collaboration, inviting the argument. So I put that there. And so then what does that actually look like? What will we want from people versus machines, I'm hoping over the next 20 years or so? Now I say I'm hoping because I'm thinking that everything sort of makes a bit of sense, but let's see where we go. Now I've put a few different ideas here, each of which can be used for good or bad. So you've got your sensors coming in. I'm sure many of us wouldn't like drones flying over us to be able to have information about what we're doing on a daily basis, but there's nothing stopping a 16-year-old from doing that. There is seriously nothing stopping someone doing it. We talk about AI, but there's actually different flavors of AI. So actually passing information or passing questions through one and then passing it through the next one, and that's a normal thing. We do the visualization, the 3D, getting it into a computer to start with. We've got additive manufacturing just here, and maybe we're creating some chatbots on the side because I don't have to answer all the questions. I can get a tool to do that for me. And so we can imagine that people are going to be doing this on a regular basis and saying, which part of the toolkit do I want to use today? So I'm orchestrating across this series of toolkits and getting them to actually work with each other. And the fun part is when you employ them creatively. You connect disparate ideas together, you orchestrate some really complex tools. And one of the things that we desperately need is people to employ and monitor these ethically. Now, ethically, as I said, I'm sure everyone's got their own view of the word ethical. I've got the engineering ethical in my mind, which means do no harm, first do no harm. So I've got that in my head, just to give you that very broad definition of what ethical might mean. But what is it that we actually want in connecting people to people? Well, we're going to get an answer coming out of here. Actually, a whole lot of answers coming out here, a lot of data coming out of here. I need someone to synthesize that, right? And on the basis of that synthesis, I need them to explore, design, develop something else. An individual person is going to get it wrong over time. I expect people to collaborate with each other, both within their discipline, but also outside of their discipline, which means that there's got to be communication. You have to learn from across communities and environments. This starts talking about the local community impact for us to be able to make global change. And at that point, maybe you're able to support that greater community building and well-being. What happens if we take some of these away? What happens? And this really starts to come down to the question of what should we be educating? So let's, oh, we didn't have it. We didn't have it there. We didn't have it there. Okay. I'm not sure. Oh, it's a PDF. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say a couple of things. This hasn't worked. Okay. What I want you to imagine is, let's remove this one. Let's remove the collaboration. Let's remove the learn from across communities and environments. Let's remove those, just those three. 1, 2, 3. And we've gone from something which is really good, if you remove those, to something which is truly scary. Right? I believe that progress in general relies on community trust. We don't all trust each other to be able to work together, then we'll reach a zenith of our technological advancement and we'll very quickly start to decline. We may be on that decline now. I think that the technology that we have is concentrating the capability for individuals. And that's a big change from what we've had in the past. I've also believed that the complex technology that we have now is highly abstracted. And that means that it can be harnessed faster and it can be used more easily. And that, to me, starts talking about the humanities and the importance of us ensuring that we have education on supporting the use of technology safely and ethically. The humanities are becoming increasingly important in our community. I wanted to show you this image. Does anyone know what that image is before I go on? That's all right. It's Edison's lab. Can anyone name the people? No. All we know is Edison, right? What we are creating is a series of Edisons. People that are able to create, orchestrate a whole lot of brilliant ideas together without necessarily knowing the details of how all of that takes place. What we are creating, what we are democratizing is Edison, is my view. And it is, not, in that sense, no different to that time, except that this was something only the very, very few and fortunate could do. We could talk about astronomers of the past who had computers who were physical people in a room not dissimilar to this, who would do all of the calculations for them. We don't know their names either. We only know the people who then benefited from that. We're democratizing that. That's what we're doing. So I had some predictions of the future here before we move into the educational side. And I'm sorry, it's too early to predict how the technology will disrupt existing disciplines, I think. And I point back to Margaret Thatcher's comment from a long time ago. It's the same problem that was discussed then. I do believe we're going to continue to rely on individuals' knowledge, their deep knowledge of their discipline, and their application of the fundamentals there. So we definitely need to maintain that. And as a community, we're going to rely upon that for the reasons I've already given. I think we can anticipate a greater volume of high-level thinking. If we reflect on the amount of time that we sit together and we do something which is truly advances, really pushing us in our field, and we think about that as a percentage of the total time that we spend, maybe we spend doing emails, etc. It's a fraction of a time. AI will allow us to be able to increase that, which will reduce the cost of some of the services that we provide and make it available to a larger proportion of the community. I do think that that will take place. And we'll rely on people to synthesize, communicate, collaborate, and provide that ethical judgment. Now, I've mentioned about individual orchestration of technology quite a bit. This is the really key part. Because of the abstraction, people are using technology that they simply don't understand. And that's just going to grow more and more. And I think that there's going to be less of a reliance on individual capabilities outside of the use of supporting technologies over time, particularly in the white collar area. And I've already mentioned some of the risks that we introduce. So what do I think our graduates can do that a chatbot can't? Well, I've already focused a little bit about what we want from the next generation. We've got to think a little bit about what world our graduates will be shaping, and then we start to answer the question. And I've been reflecting on this for a while. Now, I'm sure others will want more from the next generation than this, and that's fine. But for me, there's sort of 4 areas that I really want people to think about. I want people to be creative souls. I really, really do. We can do better than where we are now, and the core of that is by being creative. Diverse concepts, novel solutions. I want people to connect theory to practice. I want people to be able to communicate. I've mentioned the global community already, by which I mean thinking about local communities. And I want people to challenge. I want people to challenge the status quo. I want people to challenge me in what my beliefs are, because it makes me a better person for me to be able to reflect and rethink what it is that I value now. That's what I want. And so when I'm thinking it through, I think that there are 4 things that our graduates can do currently that a chatbot can't. Ethical leadership. They can provide that cultural context, rational decision-making as opposed to making a guess based on what the next word might be statistically, and collaboration, bringing those disparate ideas together. And if I'm thinking about my own children, who I've mentioned already, this really defines what I hope that they're able to contribute to our community. So then that poses the question of what we should be doing, because our purpose is to educate the next generation for that role for the next 20 years, shall we say. So with the response, I won't go too heavily on this. We started by saying, okay, we had an approach to AI quite quickly. We said that AI outputs without attribution is a form of plagiarism, but beyond that, we're giving support to academics, giving support to students. We work together as a community. And I still think that we're probably at the cutting edge of what is being done across Australia in tertiary education in response to AI. We had our immediate response, and very much apart from the reviews, we provided advice. We did review detection software, and we looked at UQ's public position on AI. We're now in that midterm area. We're looking at that professional learning and support. We need to do more there. And we still have that ongoing response. Particularly, we have some brilliant researchers in this space and connecting the research that we have with the direction that we need to go. Now, a couple of things. There is no silver bullet. There is plenty of companies out there who would like to say that they have a tool which can detect AI. It is wrong. It does not exist. Okay. And let me show you this a couple of things. This one's sort of fun. The next one's even more fun. So in this graph, what we're seeing from 2022 and 2023 semester 1 is similarity reports from Turnitin. And what we're looking at here is those similarity reports where there's a high amount of similarity. So 75 to 100% of similarity on the right-hand side, 50 to 74% of similarity on the left-hand side. And the thing that I'm still looking at, and they're just solid numbers, is this decline that you're seeing. And the question that I have there is, there's a raft of reasons why the similarity reports would be declining. There's all the training that we give to our students about academic integrity. Naturally, it's working. That's what's happened. All of the students, stop laughing, all the students have taken that on and they said, you're right, I'm wrong. Yeah. We've changed our assessment strategies. Yeah, it's possible. I know in certain faculties we have. We've changed our assessment strategies. And that could be part of the mix as well. Maybe we've just had less students or less assessment. It's possible we've got more students in country as opposed to overseas. Or part of it could be that students are using generative AI and asking it, could you please just answer this? And from this very simple view of whether they're cheating or not, and it's a very simplistic view, we're saying, well, that's actually not something we can predict. We did ask another one, and I know some folk have already seen this, but I really did like this piece. And thank you to the guys in Italy who helped me put this one together. Turnitin released a tool. They said, we can detect the use of AI. And they irritated pretty much everybody in the tertiary education sector because they said, and it's available now. There was no question, there was no debate. And in Australia, half the universities said, no, it's not, and got into a really big argument with Turnitin. And the other half said, okay, all right. And UQ was one where we said, okay, let's have a look and see what it does. So that as a community, we could learn. Cool. So this is the bit where Italy came in. This is so much fun. Dr. Emily Ross, thank you very much. We asked a question, so from the assessment task here, and we did a few things here. It's really awesome. One, use ChatGPT to generate a response and then detect that similarity score and an AI detection score. Two, after a conversation that I had with some students a few weeks before, take the answer from ChatGPT, pass it through Quillbot, and then ask, now can you detect it? Wonderful. And three, put this prompt in, just to ChatGPT. Carefully proofread the following text for grammar, spelling, punctuation errors, while preserving my writing style and voice. Make minimal adjustments to improve clarity if necessary. Use UK spelling. Here's the text. And here's the answer. The first one, AI score, 100%. So that was that simplistic one over there, right? Pass it through to AI tools, 0%. Zero. I see someone, a younger person in our crowd there, smiling away, grinning away like, yeah, you're grinning away like a Cheshire cat. Yeah, I do that. No, I don't. I know about people who do that. And fair enough. And fair enough. And then number three, this one here, 0%. That's not GPT-4, people, let alone what GPT-5 is doing. Right? So that just tells you this stuff doesn't work. Doesn't work. And it actually goes against a lot of the, what we're going to be relying upon as a community anyway. This is sort of a shut it down no matter what approach. It's opposite of what I've been saying. So let's talk a little bit about assessment. We only have a few minutes before I start winding this up. We've got a bit of a quandary. And I think that there's a two-dimensional chart. There's always a two-dimensional chart here. We've got some choices. We could ban AI. I think Italy tried to do that, did they not? And other countries in Europe. There will be other countries as well that will attempt to ban AI. And it's going to fail. It's going to fail. We could trust that it's the students' own work by making sure that they're in the room with us and that they're able to identify themselves. And at scale, the scary part about this is it doesn't actually do anything of all of those skills that we need to be able to develop with the students, because that sounds like a piece of paper and a pencil and solve this problem. It's not developing those skills that I mentioned earlier. So a traditional exam-based, I don't think is going to work. You start incorporating AI into the learning, yeah, I think that we can start doing that, and we need to do that. And so that has some challenging ethics for us, but also for our future leaders, which I think is appropriate. And then there's perhaps a bit more of the collaboration and other skills developed. There's not one answer here, but there is a bit of a movement, I would say, away certainly from banning AI, and maybe away from just automatically going back and saying, let's go to exams, because we need to be able to develop these other skills over here. I think this is my second to last slide. We then start talking about authentic assessment. And there is a question of what is authentic assessment in any discipline. This is my best attempt at answering that question. Now, it's not the most pretty attempt that I've ever done, but it's the best attempt that I've done. And I think that there are, it's from work from Gullikers et al. In 2004. And actually, when we're coming up with assessment, we've really just got 4 dimensions that we can start playing with, or 3 if we just think about social context by itself. The first one is the knowledge, skills, and attributes that we want to be able to have students demonstrate in their assessment. Now, I've put Bloom's taxonomy there. No problem. You can have any other taxonomical argument that you will. But let's go with Bloom's for now. Now, I will say I've got some issues with Bloom's taxonomy. I remember my kids being in kindergarten. They were making a boat out of blocks. I give you synthesis in kindergarten. Then the kids were saying, that block shouldn't be there. It should be over here instead. Well, they didn't say that. What they did was they kicked over all the blocks and they started rebuilding. I give you evaluation. So Bloom's in and of itself is a bit of a false promise, in my opinion, when it comes to the level of detail and the level of expertise that we have. But then there's the cognitive environment, starting from non-representative. An example, I don't think is a representative environment that we want people to be working in once they leave university. We might have something where we provide some general knowledge support and resources. Yeah, okay. So we've done, an open book exam. That's what you mean. Okay, we can do that. We can do an open book exam. That's the next level of cognitive environment. You then have, as you continue on, discipline-specific resources, or maybe a complex software platform. Now we're starting to talk. Now we're starting to talk about someone who is orchestrating all of those technologies. Okay, now that starts to make a bit of sense there, maybe. And then you start talking about simulated graduate environments, which I know we do in many different disciplines right now. And then you have the one which is really scary. You have an unfamiliar graduate environment where you're the only one with that skill set, working with a lot of people from different skill sets. And I know we do a bit of that work too, particularly in HABS right now. So that to me is the cognitive environment. It is designed to make you go, how on earth am I going to contribute and demonstrate this in a more and more unfamiliar settings? Then you've got the social context of collaborative. I would now start including AI in our thinking there for the reasons that I've given earlier, where we have the types of interpersonal skills all the way, starting from interactive responses, all the way to a lateral application of what you've been asked to solve, and everything in between. And then finally, convergent or divergent thinking. And I think a lot of what we're asking now is to think about assessment that is divergent answers rather than convergent answers. So to me, this is a pretty good framework. And you could sit there when you're setting up your assessment, couldn't you? You could sit there and say, well, I want synthesis. I want it to be with a complex software platform because that's what I've got to. People, let me think. Well, actually, I'd like to be able to see whether the students constructively critique each other in this. So I'm going to assess on that as well. And it's a design piece. We'll go with divergent thinking. So you're actually able to move across each of the dimensions and work out what type of assessment you want quite quickly. And then there's some key requirements, which I won't go into here, but we can at a later time. So I think that this then starts giving us a sense of what type of assessment we want. And when we overlay that on what we value from our community as a whole, we can start using this to develop the assessments that best develop the skills that our students need to show. Now, a brief summary. I have said a few things I know. What can our graduates do that a chatbot can't? I think that our graduates certainly can strategically develop our community's collective future. I have no concerns in saying that at all. As I said, these generative AI tools, they're not sitting there thinking about world domination by themselves. They need someone to actually orchestrate that. Our graduates can incorporate local context, community needs and interpretations, and I think we need to emphasize that more than ever. They're able to bring disparate ideas together to reimagine. They're able to contextualize based on discipline knowledge, and they're able to work as part of a multidisciplinary team. Now, I think that this gives us a bit of a direction of where we go to incorporate AI. And I put it to you that our graduates are definitely different from what ChatGPT and other generative AI can do. So with that, thank you very much. I don't know, where do you want me? In it? Okay, over here.
Okay, thanks everyone. We do have some time for questions, and we do have the people on Zoom have been putting a few things into the Padlet. But we might have a question from the room, and then I will go to Kelly or Dom to ask a question from the Padlet, but we will use a mic so that everyone can hear. Any questions from the room to start with?
Got a question way up back. G'day, Matt.
Yeah.
Thanks very much for that, Kris. That experiment you did, or that was done, looking at passing assessment through ChatGPT and then Quillbot.
Quillbot was the other one. Yep.
I was just wondering whether it's possible, whether either this was part of it, or whether it's possible to imagine the Turnitin AI coming up with 100% in instances where there hasn't been any AI use. So I guess that was one of the questions, because you demonstrate how you would manage to avoid that altogether. But if it came up as at 100%, is it possible to imagine that that person hasn't used AI?
I don't think so. So the point with the AI, and I know from colleagues at other universities where students have been picked up using that tool, and this hasn't been published. I know there's been publications in newspapers on this, but the unpublished part is where students have been brought up on disciplinary charges, and they've had to say, well, here's all my working. I'm sorry that it looks like something that ChatGPT created, but it's mine, and have been able to demonstrate that. The problem is that it's a very large statistical engine, and the size of that statistical engine just means that it's really hard to discern it from a person. I think that the number of false positives that you would get in trying to determine someone who hasn't used generative AI, and thinking all the flavors of generative AI that are out there now, you'd get a lot more error associated with that, unfortunately. That's a good idea. But, yeah. But question over here.
Question over there. I might just go to a big question here.
Yeah.
And this is around support. So given the rapid advancement in AI, how does the university plan to support staff and students in accessing these frontier modules? Could we see funding or partnerships like Sydney and Microsoft to help us generate these into our learning and research soon?
So I know that, so there's some work towards that already taking place in pilot form. I think that other universities have been a little bit more public about that type of investment than UQ has. So there's already work taking place at UQ, just to reassure you with that. I will say that looking at Microsoft's, I think it was several $100s per license, their particular license model, to have someone have that generative AI on the side, guru on the side, working with them. And if you multiply that by everybody, it's suddenly a very expensive proposition. So that's one of the concerns that we have. But we are continuing with Microsoft and others to make it more widely available, so that we can not only do the research, and as I said, the research is already underway, but also so that people can learn what it is that they anticipate students will be seeing with this book. Yeah.
Okay, over here.
How you going?
Hey, Chris, thank you so much for the presentation. Fascinating information. My question goes to the section that you're talking about biases, job displacement, ethics, and misinformation. So there are all these like statistics around, and some people are saying 30% of the jobs are going to disappear. And we know all these like sort of statistics, let's say, are like some assumptions, as you said, and it's too early to think about what's going to happen. But there was also a recent study saying that only 1% of the jobs are going to disappear. They're going to replace. And as an educational institution, are we equipped, or are there any plans to see if there will be lots of people losing their jobs and giving their positions to other people? Are we equipped to re-educate or provide any additional, let's say, support to our community that educate them for a proper future?
Thank you for your
Thank you.
question. I think there's a lot in that question. So if I don't answer it, just make sure you say you didn't answer it, and I'll make sure I do. So the simple answer in some ways is yes. We are looking at postgraduate programs across the university, building on the course material that we already have that we're developing at the minute, that is able to assist people in retraining and redeveloping and transitioning roles if that's what they need to do. So absolutely doing that. I was just in a conversation earlier today with Bell on that very question. So that's the simple answer with the yes there. With the question of the percentage of people that don't have or might need to be reassigned and redeployed, where I think that there is some confusion, or where the statistics just get really questionable in my mind, is twofold. One, in the past, when it came to technology for people that were already in a discipline, for most people, there was very much a divide. I've been used to this discipline for a very long time. This technology is foreign to me. I can't learn it. It's too hard. And so then what you have is a reduction in the workforce requirements, followed by a resurgence very quickly in people that are able to incorporate that new technology into that traditional discipline. Where I see a difference now is that point about you do not need to know the details of how the technology works in order to use it. You know, we talk about the digital generation, and I put to you, I give a student an iPad and I say, how does it work on the inside? Now, unless they're an engineering student, most will say, I do not know. If I gave a student 20 years ago a PC and I said, could you pull it apart and just take out the power for me? Most would say, I really don't want to do that. I'll get someone to watch me, but I can do it. And so there is a difference in the ability to seamlessly use technology versus understanding how it works. And I think that some of the variation that we're seeing on the percentage of people that will be redeployed is on that basis. What I think will happen instead is there'll be an expectation that you have to reach out and help more people in the community at that high level thinking. Yeah.
So just a quick one from
There.
Zoom, and then we'll go over there.
There and then somewhere. Okay.
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
I see it,
yeah.
I see it,
So
I see it, all
has
good.
ChatGPT, a very quick one, has ChatGPT put the contract cheaters out of business?
It's given them an opportunity. So what it's done, we know that the contract cheating companies, they also have a huge data set. And so they are rapidly, in fact, they already have taken those engines and put them against their big data sets. So all it has done is move away from employing people to employing computer farms, data farms. That's the big change. Now, I think it's
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
What a great talk, because it's taken it into a really interesting area, but I'm going to go into the really awful and annoying area.
I know.
And that's the marking bit, which you have alluded to, because the impact on us right now at the moment is assignments coming in. We're getting these percentage scores. We see that we might as well not have them. And I don't expect you to answer now, but the answer that I'm looking for is, are we at the university going to get guidance around how to deal with that?
So a really good question and an important one. So Jason Lodge's in the room, as are others, Dom and others who are helping me in writing a paper that is going out to TEXA to be able to say, now, what are we doing together as a community? I have provided, I was giving a presentation with Dom last year, and we were looking at how I would rewrite, for the example that I gave, how I would rewrite final year projects in engineering in terms of the assessment structure, often something with a very large essay-based piece, in order to be able to mark that through generally a brief oral exam of some description, and be able to demonstrate that actually the workload on the academics was no difference between one traditional approach, or the approach that we've had in the past, versus this new approach. What we will need to be doing very quickly is developing a raft of different approaches, and then, and we've already gone out to all of the faculties, asking them, what work's already taking place in faculties, because we don't want to be suggesting that people aren't doing great work already. But then on that, we're then going to be investing. We got to say we need to retool our own approaches to assessment to meet your point. So I hope that, yeah, great, thank you. G'day.
Yeah, g'day, mate. I've got to say, I'm pretty skeptical of your list of things that graduates can do that chatbots can't. And on that front, maybe we're not walking into a world immediately where all jobs are replaced. We certainly are walking into one where, unless you have the skills to use this technology well, you won't get the job over the other guy that does have them, right?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering about any kind of strategic policies that are maybe on the horizon for actually teaching our students how to use the technology well itself. Because I think that no matter what discipline you're training in, this technology is going to augment your job. In the short term, it's going to augment working with you. I think in the long term, it is going to replace you. But at least in that short term, let's be optimistic, right? That we still will have jobs. What are we going to do for our graduates to actually give them the skills to be competitive with the folks that have these skills?
No, look, I agree with you. So in the roadmap, we have said not only do we need to update our assessment strategy, often in the past, everyone's talked about authentic assessment. I gave my example of what authentic assessment might be there. But one of the key things that we need to invest in right now is ensuring, and I think there's an ethical responsibility on us for this, that our students can appropriately use generative AI and other forms of AI within their discipline for two reasons. Not just so that they can get the job against the other person. I agree that there's an immediacy where you're saying someone desperately needs that now. I actually want our graduates to be saying, what's the ethical decision that we have on directing how these tools are going to be used into the future, right? So for those two reasons, we've put it into the Learning and Student Experience Roadmap, which is just going through its last stage of approvals now before we get started on that work. Yeah, fully agree with you. That's all right. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. I fully agree that our students use AI, will use AI. Most likely we can't detect it and we just should let them do it. So I do that since a while, and my question is a bit workload related too. So what I do is I have an all Q&A. So I let them do whatever they want. They can use their PhD brother, they can use AI, they can use contract cheaters. I don't care.
Yeah.
They create a project, but then we have a Q&A session afterwards. And if they can't explain what they've done, if they can't do variations of the project, if they don't have the skills, they don't get the marks. But there's a problem with the workload with this one. So because this is one-on-one, or even though I do teams, the impact on the tutor marking is actually less than an exam. It goes very fast, but the organizational thing is quite a hassle to organize rooms, to organize for several hundred students at times. Is there any way that the university can help with that or acknowledge the according workloads if you try something authentic and invigilate?
We are looking at updating our scheduling tools. I mean, I think that I'm just going to pick on the scheduling part of the bit that you said was the problem at the minute, because you picked up on the point that I raised earlier about the final year projects in engineering, that you can actually do it at the same time. And I didn't mention the organizational part there. So we do need to update our scheduling tools. We are doing that right now. It's an essential piece of work. And part of that then has to be able to support our individual academics in saying, right, that exam window or that assessment window, it looks different to how it's looked in the past. And we need these tools to reflect what it is that we need. Yeah, I fully agree with that. I was going to say one more thing, if I can. I know we've got another question there, but I'd like to just briefly talk about student anxiety at the minute. And there's some research that I know Kelly is leading from UQ and others. Our students are desperately anxious at the minute. And it goes back to the question actually earlier. So sorry, I didn't raise this. They're anxious of, if I use this stuff and I'm not really thinking, am I a fraud? And if I don't use this stuff, am I in trouble because everyone else is going to? And I got to tell you, we need to explicitly talk about where and when to incorporate AI into our teaching so that students do not feel like frauds in the knowledge that they have. And they're not sitting there saying, well, I won't use it because I've got this ethical responsibility in my own mind not to cheat with everybody else. We really have to be very clear on that. And that's one of the key factors that I'm looking for in our response to TEXA, but also in the work that we do together in every discipline. So sorry, I didn't raise that earlier. But it also goes back to the point here, I think.
Okay, we might have to make this the last question. And I do know that there are some other questions in the room, but we'll go back to the Padlet link and we can keep the conversation going through Padlet.
And just on that, for your last question, you know, with the Padlet link, I'm very happy to respond, you know, myself to that, work with others to make sure that you get a response to that. And it'll be a response from me. So I'll read through the question and we'll make sure that we get the appropriate response for you. But sorry, I interrupted you.
That's okay. Thank you very much, Kris. My question might have been answered a little bit in part by others, but I was thinking more about the practicality of incorporating AI into assessments. And that's what I'm doing in my role as a learning designer, working with academics. We're trying to find ways that we can do this authentically. But some of the concerns from academics are then in equity in AI access and use, which our colleagues were mentioning before. So I'm wondering, in the context that we're moving towards having allowing students to use AI, what do you think is in the role of the different kinds of AI that we have access to? Like, students then are having an advantage over if they are able to pay for a GPT-4 or other versions or whatever else is coming out there. And how then are we able to monitor that from an assessment integrity or ethical point of view?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I don't have a good answer, and I'm sorry for that. For me, it starts with an understanding that we need a learning environment where there is a level playing field. I'm just not sure that that level playing field learning environment exists. So basically you want a sandbox ChatGPT, shall we say, for writing environment that then we know that that's the environment that people have used in their writing. There are some companies that get close to that, but I haven't seen anyone who quite does that yet. But that is essentially one of the tools that I think we're heading towards. Maybe Greg Winslet, you've seen something, but I haven't personally. But that's sort of the direction that I think we need to get to. Yeah. I'm seeing Greg thinking, no, I'll go with it. Yeah. No.
Okay.
But so I'm sorry I didn't have a good answer to that question, but it's certainly the direction we need to go. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So we just have one more item for discussion. Dom is just going to come up and have a quick chat. But again, let's thank Kris for the presentation today. And Dom, after this, we'll put back up the Padlet link, perhaps, which is on the first page.
All right. No, so thanks, everyone. So it's lovely to join in everyone in this discussion around AI and the implications for our teaching in the digital space as it keeps moving. In Italy, we've been trying to pull together networks of ways of talking around AI in our work and digital learning, also a little bit more broadly. We have a range of things coming up planned for this year. So in a couple of weeks, we've got another session with hands-on with Gen AI, trying to get people to explore this and share different activities together. That one's going to be exploring uses of generative AI to explore assessment resources, see if we can improve our rubrics, see our task guides, things like that, that we're preparing to give on to students, and sharing practices and ways we can use that. After that, we've got another What's Working. It's been a series of webinars where we've invited people from across UQ to share what their practices are. It's been a really interesting part of my work to get to hear and see what different people are doing across the university, asking both what does work and what doesn't work. We're also trying to have a discussion in person attached to that one, so an opportunity to connect further. Later in the year, we've got some international keynotes coming, which I'm really excited about. And here's a sample of some of our events. What we wanted from you was some guidance around which of these are hitting the mark for you, what are we missing, and would you like to be more involved? We have two options. One is through the Padlet link, which there's some QR codes around the room if you want to tag that. The other one is through a traditional technology that Hassan has in his hands, if you'd like to give us some paper feedback. Either way, we would really love to hear from you if you'd like to come on to any of these events, some of the other events we suggested, or would like to get more involved in helping us make this network work, and continue having some of these conversations together, because I think that's the richest place for learning and advancing in this area. All right, I'm going to hand it.
Just introduce Jason Lodge just for a few closing comments. Thank you, Jason.
Thanks, Karen. Thank you again, Kris. I think it's probably fair to say that a lot of the conversation we've been having about AI over the last year has been dominated by the assessment question and assessment integrity. What I liked about what you did is that I think you combined the acute problem, that is academic integrity and possible cheating, with what I think is the chronic problem. And the chronic problem is what and how do we teach now? I think the other thing, and from some of the comments and questions in the room, is that there are quite a number of issues that we probably need to spend some time thinking about around things like AI literacy. How much do students really need to know about the tools, given that there is so much change, which also has elements in there of what I understand is called explainable AI, and how much we are able to explain what these tools are doing and what's happening in the background. But to me, there is also a component in this, which is about how do we help students become adaptive learners for the age of AI? Because I think one thing that we can be sure of is that change and complexity is something that we're all going to have to deal with even more now because of these tools. It is hard to predict what's going to happen in the future. And I think as a result of that, we have to think about some of the things that we can do to make sure that we're preparing our students for any and all futures that might be coming. And that's a difficult task, but there are some things I think that, about the ability to be able to adapt, to be resilient, to understand themselves, and to then be able to extrapolate from that about what that might mean for working with machines. I think even if the technology doesn't develop any further from here, so if we are getting to the point where machine learning and deep learning algorithms are reaching their pinnacle, which I'm not sure if the case, Hassan probably would know much better than I would, but even if that is the case and there is no further development from here, we already have to rethink what we're doing on the basis of the technology that's out there, right? And I think, again, some of the comments are alluding to that. So Kelly's asked me to be hopeful at the end of this. That sounds all a little bit scary. The one thing I think that gives me a lot of hope here is that we're not alone. There are 204 higher education institutions around the country. There are 9,000 schools around the country. We are all grappling with this same problem. From talking to people in the education departments, the federal department and all the state departments, it's very rare for them all to agree on anything, apparently. Not surprising if you think about the different states. But this is one thing where I think there is broad agreement that we have a problem and that it would be to our collective benefit to try and figure this problem out together. We have a national parliamentary inquiry happening at the moment, and I think that also gives me some hope that, politicians are also paying quite a lot of attention to this as an issue. And when that happens, hopefully that means that something will, happen to be able to help facilitate how we might come up with some of the answers around this. So that's just some of my reflections on where I think we are and building on the comments. Thank you again, Kris. I think that was useful to get your sense of where you think we are with this and where this is all headed. And like I said, I think bringing that acute and chronic problem together and thinking about what we teach, how we teach, and how we assess all together, I think is good to see, because that's often not the conversation that we're having. So thank you again. Thank you everybody for coming along and for joining online. I thought it was a very good discussion and one that we will continue to have in the years ahead. Thank you all.